Welcome to the Magnus. My name is George Breslauer. I'm the faculty director of the Magnus. And today we are fortunate to have with us Dr. Noreen Green, who is internationally recognized as an expert lecturer on Jewish music. She's spoken at numerous national and international symposia and for the LA Philharmonic's Upbeat Live series. And she's been involved in Jewish music as a musician and educator for 30 years. She's the conductor and artistic director of the Los Angeles Jewish Symphony, which she founded in 1994. One area of music that has always intrigued Dr. Green is that of film music, especially the powerful impact of Jewish composers since the very beginning of the film industry. We are honored to have her here today to take us through a fascinating journey from the early days of Jews in film to the present. Please welcome Dr. Noreen Green.
Thank you, George. I think I've met almost everybody in the audience. If I haven't, then thank you for coming out and listening to the talk. The subject of the Jewish contribution to the art of film music, especially the Jewish contribution, is vast. Books, college degrees, curriculums, symposiums have been dedicated to the subject. Living in LA and being in the music industry, you can't not be affected by the industry. This evening, we will look at just a small sampling of the music and the composers who impacted the industry from past to present. I have been lucky to work with some wonderful composers and musicians who are involved in the art form of putting music to film. I'm also very involved with the classical musical world, which still tends to look down at the film and TV composer and now the video game composers as being second class to that of opera, symphony, or concert music. I assure you they are not. They are some of the finest musicians making music today, and under incredible time pressure. I have given several concerts with the theme Cinema Judaica, and so have some interesting tidbits to tell to go along with the facts. During the talk, we will look at some film clips, and at the end, we'll look at some clips of the Los Angeles Jewish Symphony's performances of some of that music. So, let's get started. Music is secondary to the film, yet a basic need. Music exerts a manipulative control over the audience. A motion picture's major drawback is the lack of direct audience communication as compared to live theater in all its forms. Audience and screen are brought together in closer relationship through the music. I love this quote by Bernard Herrmann. Music on the screen can seek out and intensify the inner thoughts of the characters. It can invest a scene with terror, grandeur, gaiety, or misery. It often lifts mere dialogue into the realm of poetry. It is the communicating link between screen and audience, reaching out and enveloping all into one single experience. So, who knows when the first talkie came out and what it was? The Jazz Singer, 1927, almost. Starring Al Jolson. And as we all know the story, right, the son doesn't want to go into the cantorial business, and he goes off and makes his own way, and he comes back at the end, and what does he sing in order to create amends with his father for leaving the old country, the old world ways? He sings the Kol Nidre. So the Kol Nidre has come to represent the emotional link between father and son. It is also a way of asking your father for absolution against the sin of leaving the tribe. By 1940, now remember that because that's going to relate to our film clip. By 1940, film scoring was recognized as a highly specialized compositional form. The film industry we know as Hollywood grew out of a foreign ideology. Commercial film music the industry was founded and propagated, by Europeans. The events in Europe and Russia in the early 20th century resulted in great talents, Jewish talents, immigrating to the States. Composers found unusual opportunity in the Hollywood studios. As the wave of Jewish immigrants came, they then helped bring their friends over as events in Europe worsened. The Jewish immigrant composers found a lucrative business in the creation of film music. The foundation of this industry were three composers, Max Steiner, Eric Korngold, and Alfred Newman. Max Steiner was born in Vienna. He lived from 1888 to 1971. His background was musical theater. He came to the States in 1914 and worked on Broadway. He worked with Victor Herbert, George Gershwin, Jerome Kern. In 1929, he came to Hollywood. Now, in 1929, we know was the year of the crash. Musicians were out of work everywhere. In theater, the vaudevilles were closing. Well-known musicians and orchestra leaders were brought to Hollywood, and in 1932, there was a breakthrough film. It was called Symphony of 6 Million. It was a story of a Jewish doctor from the east side of New York moving on up to Park Avenue and losing some of his Jewish identity along the way. Max Steiner was asked to score by the director, the famous director, David Selznick. One reel, 10 minutes, just to see what music would do to the scene and how it would affect. Now, the industry was a little bit afraid of what they called non-source music. So when you go see a film, if there's a radio playing and the music is coming out of it, the audience knows where the music is coming from. Underscore, they don't know where it's coming from. And the directors felt that we would be confused. The audience would be confused. So where's the music coming from? So this was an experiment at the time to see what would happen with this scene if they had underscore music. So what happened to it? We're going to see, there it is the deathbed scene. So the father is very ill, and the son, who is the Jewish doctor, is going to be operating on the father. Now, this can't happen in real life, as you know. And listen to see what music is played as he's rolled into the operating room. And then we're going to cut to after the operating room, coming back, and listen again to what's played, very briefly. And then there's a second tune. So you have two tunes you have to identify. Okay, here we go.
My soil. I've been loyal with him. I've been working for him.
Can you hear it? Konidre. And if you know your Konidres, it's a direct take of Bruch's Konidre. Now this is the end. So you hear remnants of the Konidre. The music changes. Now listen to this tune. He died, by the way. And you know what Orthoprepatic is, right? It's teaching to your children the Aleph Beis. So Max Steiner, even though he didn't really feel Jewish when he came to the States. He didn't identify with being Jewish, yet he knew these two tunes and he wrote the music to it. And at the end of his life, we discover that the only consistent donation he ever made was to the United Jewish Fund. And he got an award at the end of his life from the United Jewish Fund for his donation. The bells, but toll belling on the door. Okay, so Max Steiner, the next breakaway film that he did was in 1933, and it was King Kong. So this was really the start of the golden age of film music. This is another quote from a contemporary composer, Danny Elfman. I think it is important to remember that when Steiner sat down to score King Kong, there were almost no references. He was practically starting from a clean slate, uncharted territory. So many things that Steiner did we take for granted now that the language has been defined. Steiner really is the granddaddy of this wonderful art form. So what Max Steiner did, now he was a classically trained composer who came from Austria. He used what's called Wagner's leitmotif. If you are an opera fan, the leitmotif is a motive that's associated with each character of the opera. And the motive will change during the opera depending on what's happening to the character. So he did that in King Kong. He gave each character its own leitmotif. He also uses a very interesting film technique, he developed it, called Mickey Mousing. What is Mickey Mousing? So if you think about cartoons, and let's say one of the characters has to cross a bridge, and he's tiptoeing across the bridge. So you hear the string going, boop, 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 okay? And it's synchronized to the footsteps of the animated character. That's called Mickey Mousing. It is the over-illustrating or the exact synchronization of the action through the musical score. So this Mickey Mousing is used in the sacrificial dance that we're going to watch now, King Kong. So, I don't know if you remember the movie, but Fay Ray is being taken up to the thing to be hung, and King Kong is going to come and get her. So listen to how the music represents and over-illustrates what's happening on the screen. And then you hear the excitement and the terror of the natives, and then you finally hear King Kong's steps, and they use the low brass. Vroom, vroom, and it sets up this whole terror. Now remember, this is 1933. This would be comical. Probably still is comical now, right? All right, the next composer we're going to go to is Erich Korngold. He was the highest paid composer of his time, and he was hailed as a second Mozart. He grew up in Vienna, the son of the feared music critic. And although Steiner and he were both born in Vienna, they probably didn't know each other, but I'm sure Max Steiner knew of Erich Korngold's father. When Erich was 10 years old, he played for Mahler, who declared him a genius. A few years later, with a couple of operas already written, at 12 years old, Puccini remarked that the boy had such talent, he could easily give us some and still have enough left over for himself. His compositional influences were Straussian orchestral color, Mahlerian feeling, melodic concepts of Puccini combined with Korngold's own personality. His most famous opera was written in 1920. It was called Die Tote Stadt, and it came to the Met. Max Reinhardt, the famous opera director, brought it over, and it was produced in the 1930s. In 1934, Warner Brothers, we have a Warner Brothers descendant here of the music industry, asked Reinhardt, the most famous stage director, to direct the film version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And he asked Korngold to adapt Mendelssohn's music for the film. This interested Korngold, so he accepted. Now, Korngold had an amazing sense of time. He never used what they call click tracks. So when you're scoring a film, when you come in to do the music, there's a whole orchestra in front of you, and the film is up on the screen. And the conductor has to fit the music to the screen. And they do that with a click track. And there's a bar that comes across, and you know to start the music. And then in your ear, you hear the click. So you know when to play, to make sure that it is timed exactly right to the film. Korngold never used that. He had an innate sense of time that was uncanny, and nobody to this day has been able to duplicate that. His story is sadly ironic. Hailed as a genius in boyhood, in adulthood with the rise of Nazism, he no longer could exist in the European opera world. Timing is everything, and when he came to Hollywood, Warner Brothers was looking for a composer to score its well-produced, intelligent costume dramas. Korngold saw the film scenario as another form of operetta, and the combination worked magnificently. he still resisted the lure of Hollywood and returned to Vienna to see, in 1937, the staging of his opera Die Kathrin. The Nazis delayed the performance several times and finally forbade it. That, coupled with a sickly son who needed the warm climate of California, convinced Korngold it was time to leave Vienna, his beloved Vienna, and come to Hollywood. And he was asked to score the music for The Adventures of Robin Hood. And Korngold equates this movie with saving his life, because if he hadn't gotten that job to come over, we know what would have happened. So, the next thing we're going to see is a scene from The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, The March of the Merry Men. Now, we know Robin Hood's a good guy, right? Steals from the rich, gives to the poor. So this scene is where his merry men are going to ambush Sir Guy and Maid Marian in the Sherwood Forest. Now, we know that it's not going to be a bad scene because of the music. The music is very lighthearted and playful. And Korngold's music is in itself a piece of concert music. It has a beginning and a middle and an end, just like a piece of concert music. So now we're going to look at the scene, Korngold's Merry Men, the ambush of the Merry Men. Take notice of when the music is there and when it's not there. It comes underneath with the dialogue, then it comes back up to increase the action. concert music. I actually did the Korngold Violin Concerto, which is 3 movements, and each movement is based on one of his movie themes. And it's just a great concert piece. So the next composer we're going to go to is Alfred Newman. Alfred Newman is actually the first film composer born in America, not one of the émigré composers. He was a concert pianist, and at 17 was the youngest music director on Broadway. His family, Ukrainian Jewish. He arrived in Hollywood in 1930 to be music director for an Irving Berlin film, but it wasn't ready to be scored. So instead, he scored 5 other films for Sam Goldwyn, and then became the master of all music. Now, Alfred Newman is also a granddaddy of the Newman dynasty. And I actually know some of the Newmans. Maria Newman, his youngest daughter, is a good friend of mine. I do her music. She's the classical composer of the group. There's Tom and David Newman, who you've heard their scores many, many times. And his nephew is Randy Newman. And his brother was Emil and Lionel Newman, and they were all in the Hollywood film industry. I had the great pleasure of going to the Alfred Newman scoring stage and working there, and it's just an incredible, incredible place. He won 9 Oscars, but only one for composing the music to the Song of Bernadette. All others were a musicians group. So what happens during that time, and still today, is there's one composer who gets the film credit, but he probably has 20 or 30 composers under him and orchestrators who are doing certain cues, but only the main composer gets the film credit. So, and it's that way today too, but at least they get some screen credit, the orchestrators. I'm not going to do the Song of Bernadette. I'm going to skip forward a little bit and go. The Song of Bernadette is the one he won the Oscar for, and when I do my other lectures, we look at the Song of Bernadette because you hear what they call the Newman strings. He did these high strings. But he also scored a wonderful film. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. Called Diary of Anne Frank. And since we're concentrating on the Jewish contribution, I'm going to go forward a little bit to that. So the Diary of Anne Frank, here we go. Alfred Newman actually went to Anne's father and talked to him about what it was like living in the attic. And this scene that we're going to watch is it's spring, and Peter and Anne are falling in love. And all the action takes place on the top of the attic, the space where they could go and have a little bit of fresh air. The whole scene, there's no dialogue, and the music is really what describes what's happening as they fall in love. And I just think it's a beautiful scene. And I did the whole suite from the Diary of Anne Frank, and Alfred Newman's music, it was just so emotional to perform his music without the film, just his music was incredible. So this is the Spring Awakening.
I'm only confused. I'm longing, so longing for everything.
There's the high string, that's his signature. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Victor Young. I'm not going to show a film clip, just because his name's going to come up later on. Victor Young, 1900 to 1956, he came to Hollywood in 1936, died in 56. So for 20 years, he was arranging, orchestrating, and conducting 350 films. That's an amazing number. He was a classically trained violinist, and he premiered with the Warsaw Philharmonic. He was nominated for 19 Academy Awards and won one. Anybody know? Victor Young's Academy Award winning? It was Around the World in 80 Days. That's the only one that he won the Academy Award for. He scored other movies, Samson and Delilah, Shane, and Rio Grande. I'm not going to show a clip of that one though. So we're going to go on to The Red Pony. It was scored by Aaron Copland. Now Aaron Copland, of course, was a contemporary, classically trained composer, and many of them scored for films. Vaughan Williams, Prokofiev, Shostakovich. So what's interesting about listening to Aaron Copland, if you're familiar with his music, he has a very signature sound. He's considered the Americana composer. And so he was asked to score The Red Pony. And if you know like Appalachian Springs and some of his other music, listen to how you can hear the signature Aaron Copland sound scored to The Red Pony.
Small ranches sit in the hollows of the skirts of the Coast Range mountains. Some the remnants of old and gradually disintegrating homesteads. Some the remains of Spanish grass. To one of them in the foothills to the west of Salinas Valley, the dawn comes, as it comes to 1,000 others.
Have an orchestrator. He did his own. The next composer is Franz Waxman. His ability as a film composer was superior, although he considered himself primarily a concert hall conductor. His style was that of the late German romantics with a wonderful gift of melody. He was aware of the work of his contemporaries, Arnold Schoenberg, Paul Hindemith, who were going down the path of 12-tone and atonalism, but he chose to fight against them and stay as a melodist. He was born in Poland to a wealthy Jewish family, He went to Dresden, then Berlin to study music at the conservatories. And in 1930, he started composing for the German film industry. In 1934, he was beaten up on the streets and moved to Paris, like many other talented Jewish artists. With the rise of Nazism, went to Paris. The German film industry never recovered. He is the only composer to win 2 Oscars 2 years in a row. Anybody know what those 2 films were? Sunset Boulevard and A Place in the Sun. His concert music is all Jewish music, but he made his living writing film music. So we're going to see a scene from Sunset Boulevard. Gloria Swanson, of course, won an Oscar for this. She plays the Norma Desmond. This is the final scene where she comes down the staircase and the reporters and the newsroom cameras are rolling. She's just killed William Holden. So the music, the fanfares, and the tango are demented and have these strange harmonies because you know that this woman, there's something wrong with her. She's off the deep end and she thinks she's in a movie, and Waxman is underscoring her dialogue.
Everything set up, gentlemen? Lights ready? All set. I'm ready, Norma.
What is the scene? Where am I?
This is the staircase of the palace.
Oh, yes. Yes. Down below, they're waiting for the princess. I'm ready.
All right. Cameras. Action. So they were turning after all. Those cats. Life, which can be strangely merciful, had taken pity on Norma Desmond. The dream she had clung to so desperately had enfolded her.
I can't go on with the scene. I'm too happy. Mr. DeMille, do you mind if I say a few words? Thank you. I just want to tell you all how happy I am to be back in the studio, making a picture again. You don't know how much I've missed all of you. And I promise you I'll never desert you again. Because after Salome, we'll make another picture and another picture. You see, this is my life. It always will be. There's nothing else. Just us. The cameras. And those wonderful people out there in the dark. All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Franz Waxman also scored another film, The Story of Ruth. It's the only redeeming quality of the whole film. Now there's a little, I told you I'd tell you a little tidbit. So the story of Ruth, we all know, Boaz and Naomi, the whole biblical story. Ruth says that she's going to go wherever Naomi goes, and she goes, follows her, and ends up marrying Boaz and converting to Judaism. So there's a wonderful oratorio that Franz Waxman arranged with Boaz and Naomi as narrators and the story of Ruth music. The music is gorgeous. And I did this talk and lecture and concert in Israel, and so we translated it into Hebrew and brought it to the orchestra there. So it was at the Reuben Academy of Music, and it was a student orchestra. And the beginning and the end of the suite has a shofar blast. So when I went to the orchestra manager, I said, so we have someone playing the shofar. He says, no, nobody plays the shofar here. I said, we're in Israel. He says, yeah, but this is a conservatory. Nobody plays a shofar here. I said, well, that's how the suite starts and that's how the suite ends, so we need someone to play the shofar. A composer friend of mine, Joseph Dorfman, said, I have a shofar at home, I'll bring it in and we can give it to one of the players. I said, great, we'll give it to the principal French horn player, because the embouchure, which is how the lips are, very similar between the shofar blowing and the French horn. So he brought the shofar in, I gave it to the principal French horn, who was a student, and she tried to play it, and nothing came out. So she said, give me a day and I'll figure it out. So she went home and practiced, came back, next rehearsal, give her the cue. She handed it back to me and said, I can't do it. I said, okay. Well, the student orchestra was being beefed up by professionals, so the trombone section were all professionals, and they were Russian. And so the principal trombone player comes up to me and says, don't worry, I'm professional, I'll play the shofar, give it to me. Okay. So now a trombone has this huge mouthpiece, right? Like this. Much different than a shofar. So I said, sure, you're a professional. So I hand him the shofar, splittering all over the place. So the second trombone player now says, I can do it. No sound. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm in Israel and I can't find a shofar player. Now I can play the shofar, but I can't conduct and play the shofar at the same time. So the second trombone player says, okay, we'll get it together. Now it's the concert time. I'm relying on them to figure this out. They're brass players. So, and I know in the back of my mind that the cue is written in the French horn part. So if we can't come up with it, the French horn can play it, but I would prefer to have the sound of the shofar. So they're outside smoking, and I go outside and I said, has somebody figured out how to blow this shofar? No. I said, okay, now, I'm a conductor, I'm also the head bottle washer and the fixer. So I said, take your mouthpiece out of your trombone and stick it in the shofar, cover it with your hand, put it up, and blow. So concert comes, I give the cue, this beautiful shofar blast comes out, the whole orchestra they go like this to clap during the thing. So that's my shofar story for the story of Ruth. Pretty funny. So we're going to see just the one scene. This is the love scene between Boaz and Ruth, and then the ending shofar blast.
Go in peace, my children. Go with God's blessings and a blessing.
That's the love scene. It's gorgeous. It's a terrible movie.
Jesse was the father of David, the king.
I really couldn't do it without a shofar. Franz Waxman also started the Los Angeles Music Festival, and that boosted the cultural scene for Jews in Los Angeles. All the film composers, all the Jewish film composers would get together and do their art music at the Hollywood Bowl. That happened for many, many years. He also started the Palestine Orchestra, which is now the Israel Philharmonic. So Franz Waxman was a very significant figure as a Jewish immigrant. The next one we're going to talk about is Dmitri Tiomkin. He was 1894 to 1979, born in Ukraine. He studied at the St. Petersburg Conservatory, concert pianist, played in all the theaters in Russia, went to Berlin. And then he came to the States, and he was offered to play in the vaudeville circuit. There he learned the true American style of music, including jazz and musical theater, which added to his Russian romanticism and German classicism. In 1929, he was one of those who was with the crash. He and his wife needed to shift careers. She was a dancer, and she convinced the studios to add ballet sequences to the film. They made their way to Hollywood. Tiomkin's biggest success were the Westerns. He won 4 Oscars and made Oscar history with his speech, thanking his teachers, Beethoven, Brahms, Wagner, Strauss, and Rimsky-Korsakov. He left the stage to laughter like that from the audience. We're going to see a clip of High Noon. And Dmitri Tiomkin was also a great businessman, and he invented what's called the title song. The title song is to the main titles, Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling, and it was sung by Tex Ritter. Now what they did was they released the song before the movie. So the song became income for the movie and kind of anticipated the coming of the movie. And that's done now, like all of the 007 movies, right? The title song comes out before the movie comes out, and so you kind of anticipate and know what's happening. It was a very commercially savvy move on his part. Now, there's one other thing about Dmitri Tiomkin that is very funny. He had a very funny sense of humor. Someone came and said, "You're from Russia, and you're writing all the music for these Western movies. How do you relate to the Western?" And he says, "A step is a step, a plane is a plane, whether it's Russia or America." So here we have High Noon by Dmitri Tiomkin.
He made a vow while in
to Bernard Herrmann. Bernard Herrmann was also an American-born composer, Jewish composer. He was studied at Juilliard, and he became the staff conductor of the CBS Orchestra. He championed many composers' work, and he also was the Hitchcock composer. He won the Oscar for All That Money Can Buy, and he also wrote the music for Citizen Kane, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and Jane Eyre. So Hitchcock's genius, where is the music coming from, was always what Hitchcock would ask Bernard Herrmann. How are you going to explain to the audience where the cameras are? So what we're going to watch is the famous scene from Psycho. Hitchcock did not want to have music. He just wanted to have the sound of the shower and the knife entering the body. He thought that was more effective with all the different camera angles. Bernard Herrmann, in his genius, showed the scene to Hitchcock without music and then with music. And we all know how that ended. So we're going to do the same thing. And just an aside, Janet Leigh, her daughter is Jamie Lee Curtis, was my roommate in college. Until she got her contract with for Halloween and did all the Scream movies. Okay, we're going to now jump to Elmer Bernstein. Elmer Bernstein lived between 1922 and he just died in 2004. He really combined the best of American jazz with the Americana, like Copland. Some of his movies, Ten Commandments, The Man with the Golden Arm, True Grit, The Magnificent Seven, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Rainmaker. So The Ten Commandments was his big breakthrough movie. He had just scored The Man with the Golden Arm, and that had a lot of jazz, and people were taking note of this young composer, Elmer Bernstein. Cecil B. DeMille asked Victor Young, if you remember Victor Young we talked about, to score the movie for Ten Commandments. But Victor Young was scoring Around the World in 80 Days, and he was also ill. So he said, you know, I think Elmer Bernstein should do it. Elmer was contracted to do the dance sequences and some of the other parts of the Ten Commandments, but he wasn't hired to score the whole film. So on Victor Young's recommendation, Cecil B. DeMille asked Elmer Bernstein to score the whole film. It was really his breakthrough film, putting his compositional style in line with Korngold, Steiner, and Waxman, using the big orchestra colors. So the scene we're going to see is the Exodus scene. It's a very famous story when Cecil B. DeMille was reviewing the dailies and he saw the scene with the Jews leaving Egypt. He said, oh my gosh, I don't know if he said, oh my gosh, but he said, this scene is taking so long. Speed it up. Elmer, we need faster music. So.
Israel, remember this day when the strong hand of the Lord leads you out of bondage.
Let me see the mule. Let me see the mule.
400 years in bondage, and today he won't move.
I love this is a little dialogue between John Williams and Steven Spielberg about composing music to put to film for Jaws.
When he finally played the music for me on the piano and previewed the main Jaws theme, I expected to hear something kind of weird and melodic, you know. It looked kind of tonal but eerie and of another world, almost a bit like outer space, inside, you know, inner space, under the water. And what he played me instead with 2 fingers on the lower keys was dun 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 dun. And at first I began to laugh. I thought he had a great sense of humor. He was putting me on. And he said, no, that's the theme to Jaws. And I said, play it again. He played it again. And he played it again. And it suddenly seemed right. But when I first heard it, it seemed wrong. Because it just seemed too simple. And so simple. Often the best ideas are the simplest ones. And John found his signature for the entire movie.
One could alter the speed of this ostinato. It could be note, 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 note. Any kind of alteration of speed to very slow, very fast, very soft, very loud. All these things could manipulate the moment to illustrate that the shark was at the highest pitch of frenzy or something lower. And this simple dramatic device seemed to be what we needed.
Now, John Williams isn't Jewish, but he's married to someone who's Jewish, and his kids grew up at a synagogue near our house. John Williams' influence was Eric Korngold.
My favorite cue in Jaws has always been that barrel chase, where the shark approaches the boat and they harpoon the animal and he takes the line out and the barrels lift off the boat and the music accelerates and becomes very exciting.
music for the Merry Men,
Follow the
the
Shah.
Korngold. This is direct influence between Eric Korngold's music and John Williams' music.
If you like, of triumph as they going through the waves, chasing the shark. Suddenly the shark dives down, the music deflates and gets slower and slower and slower. The deflation and disappointment of the realization that the shark hasn't been captured, all illustrated in this one area where the music is able to follow all that dramatic outline and punctuate it.
And without that score, to this day, I believe the film would have only been half successful.
Okay, so now we're going to go to a few of the clips of the LA Jewish Symphony. So the first one is going to be, you're going to see a little bit of the Ten Commandments. I'm going to actually fast forward a little bit. Let's see. This is where you need an IT person. No, this is not it. We're going to skip ahead here. That's not the LAJS. Okay. Well, so these are excerpts from my Cinema Judaica. The first one is a little bit of the Ten Commandments suite, that music of Elmer Bernstein. And then we're going to go into Charles Fox, Victory in Entebbe. Charles Fox is at the piano. If you remember the story of Entebbe, in 1976, terrorists hijacked Air France airplane and diverted it to Uganda, and they demanded in exchange for hostages. And there is this movie starred Linda Blair, Theo Bickel, Elizabeth Taylor, Kirk Douglas, Richard Dreyfuss, Helen Hayes, Burt Lancaster, and Anthony Hopkins. It was a TV movie. Charles Fox is the composer of every 70s TV show I ever watched growing up. Love American Style, The Love Boat. He wrote Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, all of the themes, and Killing Me Softly with his song. But he's also wrote the music to this film. He's a Sabra. He's from Israel. And you'll see him playing the piano. And what you'll see here is the theme when they are doing the selection of the they're separating the Jewish passengers from the non-Jewish passengers. And then the very last music you'll hear is the plane leaving with the hostages and Israel taking them off to safety. So we're going to watch these two clips. To the Los Angeles Jewish Symphony performance of Cinema Judaica, film scores on Jewish themes. Ever since the craft of putting music to film has been recognized as an essential element of the filmmaking process, Jewish names have dominated the list of composers. Names such as Eric Korngold, Eric Zeisel, Mario Casanova Tedesco, Alfred Newman and his entire family, Andre Previn, and the list goes on and on and on. We feature a few of those composers tonight. Just one little comment. I played this in Israel too, at that same concert with the shofar blowers. And it was very moving to perform the Vitriol and Tevi in Israel because every single person in that orchestra either knew somebody or was family of either a hostage or one of the IDF soldiers that came over to rescue those people in Uganda. So that's it for tonight. I think if you have any questions.